let me start by asking each of you to calculate how old you're going to be in the year 2050. Hold that thought. Despite having worked for over 30 years in energy technology development, I didn't fully appreciate what we were doing to our planet until I read an article about the impact of climate change on coffee. I was born in Colombia, and the article said that if climate change goes unchecked, by the year 2050, we will have lost 75% of Colombia's coffee growing ability. I couldn't believe that. They tell us climate change is about sea level rise. They tell us it will happen in our children and grandchildren's generation. No, climate change is a fundamental change to our ecosystem, to our way of life, and it will happen in our lifetimes. I will be 90 in 2050, and I have every intention of being around. But we're already seeing the changes. We don't have to wait for 2050. Last year, the Weather Service had to add colors to describe the intensity of Harvey's rain and to describe the heat in Australia. In January, it was hotter in the Arctic than it was in parts of Europe. And last summer, it was so hot in Phoenix that 50 planes were grounded over a 2-day period because it was too hot to fly. Houston, Puerto Rico, Ellicott, Maryland, Oman, California. So how do we stop this? How would we stop this suffering? And in my mind, what we have to do is rethink carbon. We have to come to believe that all carbon is precious. Not just the carbon in diamonds, all carbon. And we need to lock it all away and only take it out when we absolutely have to. So let's talk about when we have to. We don't need carbon for energy production. The levelized cost of renewable electricity today is equivalent to the levelized cost of fossil-derived electricity. We don't need to waste any more carbon on power production. However, fuels require carbon, and it's going to take a long time before we displace fuels from the aviation industry or other heavy uses. So we need to reserve carbon and some of our carbon budget for aviation. And of course, everything in our homes, from the carpet fiber to our yoga pants to our sneakers, is made from carbon. So we've got to reserve carbon for those things. And of course, if you really think carbon is precious, you have to think about recycling carbon. You have to focus on reusing it. And you have to stop having carbon on a one-way street from the ground to a product to our atmosphere. It has to stop. Now, the concept of carbon recycling is not new, right? Trees, plants, that's what they do. They carbon recycle. They take carbon out of the atmosphere and they make products. But we're putting too much carbon in the air. Trees are not enough. So what we need to do is develop technologies that are able to mimic what trees do and to recycle carbon. The good news for all of us is that, in fact, there are lots of people working on this. In fact, there's an entire field developing. It's called CCU, Carbon Capture and Utilization. Lots of people working on how to do this. I am lucky enough to be a member of that community and to be working on this. And I'll describe our work so you can see what's possible, what we can do. So let me tell you about this technology. You're used to the fermentation of sugar. That's how we make wine. That's how we make ethanol for our cars. Basically, yeast picks up sugar and converts it to ethanol. What we do is we have a bacteria that eats waste gases. And it takes those waste gases and converts them to fuel ethanol. Where do you get these waste gases? You get them from industrial sites, like steel mills, like refineries. And so all we do is we take the carbon from those emissions, we compress it into our bioreactor, and we convert that to ethanol. So basically, pollution to fuel in your car. So you're sitting there going, oh my God, this is science fiction. It's not. This is a 100,000 gallon per year demonstration scale facility that we built in China, literally at a steel mill. It's been running since 2012. It worked. It worked well enough that we built this beautiful baby. We built this commercial plant. This commercial plant is at the same steel mill, and it's going to produce, when it's fully operational, 16 million gallons of ethanol per year, all from steel mill waste gases being converted to ethanol. And actually, we just started it up. We started it up on May 3rd. Okay, so it's operating now. Not at full capacity, but it's operating now. So when you think about it, I'm talking about taking pollution and converting it to fuel-grade ethanol. Now, I did start by saying aviation fuels were super important for us to focus on. And so the question is, can we recycle carbon to make aviation fuel? And the answer is yes, because it turns out that there's technology out there to convert ethanol to drop-in jet fuel. And we have converted some of this recycled carbon ethanol into jet fuel. And in fact, we've qualified it now for flight, and you will soon hear that Virgin Atlantic will fly a commercial flight using recycled carbon jet fuel. It's real. It's going to happen this year. I dream of a day when a steel mill will not only make the steel for a plane, but will also make the fuel that goes into that plane. I dream of a day when you can buy a flight based on what type of fuel is flying, whether it's flying on recycled carbon fuel or whether it's flying on conventional jet fuel. I dream of a day when you can go into a store and buy something that's made from recycled carbon, where you can buy the things you use from recycled carbon, just like you can choose whether to buy organic milk or fair trade coffee. I want you to have that choice. But more importantly, I want you to ask for it. I want you to go into the stores and ask for recycled carbon goods, because you are the ones that can drive this change. You hold the power. They tell me that solving climate change is a fantasy, that it'll never happen, that this is our fate and we can't stop it. I completely disagree. I lived through a time where I couldn't go out and play in Los Angeles because it was so polluted outside. I grew up in a time where rivers were so polluted, they used to go up in flames. I grew up in a time where we talked about putting sunglasses on babies because the ozone hole was getting so big that they were going to go blind. We solved all of this. We can solve this one. We just have to choose to solve this one. We just have to want it. And that's what we need to do. We need all of you to learn to think about carbon, to be carbon smart. You need to ask for carbon products. You need to ask where your carbon comes from. We need to create a movement. And if we do, I guarantee you, will solve this problem.